Hello, YNABers. My name is Jesse Meekum, and this is podcast number 24 for You Need a Budget, where we teach you 4 rules to help you stop living paycheck to paycheck, get out of debt, and save more money. Today I want to talk about the disaster effect. I noticed it first when we moved from Provo, Utah, down to Dallas, Texas, for our first full-time job and last. No, this is a full-time job too. But headed down to my indentured servitude at a big accounting firm, and we were driving east on, I think it was I-10 from Phoenix. We had just gone east of El Paso, about 60 miles out, and our Chevy Prism, which is one of the best cars ever made, a little gem. I wish they still made them. Anyway, we were driving that thing, loved it, and had all of our 2 kids and all of our belongings packed into that car. Well, not all of our belongings. Moving truck also. I had a friend, we were splitting it, and he was driving that down. So we're driving east, about 60 miles out of El Paso, and suddenly the car starts smoking. Smoke just billowing out of the hood. And I pull over. The oil is completely dry, so I'm thinking, well, what idiot didn't put oil in the car, which would be me, but I had, and it ended up that we had run over something that had basically put a hole in the engine. So we got a tow truck, we all crammed into the front seat of this tow truck, and he towed us back to El Paso. El Paso had just had flooding, so they wouldn't be able to look at our car. I mean, flooding, like cars had been waterlogged, so they had a bunch of people with engine trouble, and they wouldn't be able to look at our car until they were done with their queue, and it would have been about 5 days. And we were moving, and I had a job lined up and all that stuff. So we rented a car and started paying through the nose for that car. We rented a minivan and cruised on out to Dallas. And then we were on the hunt for not 1, but 2 cars, because we found out that our car was completely totaled. We'd been planning to buy a van, and now we were going to buy a van plus a commuter car for me. And we had only saved up enough money to buy the van. So we had a problem, and we were also driving around that rental car. That was a problem because, you're sitting there bleeding money. So you're anxious to buy the cars to stop spending the $40 or $50 a day or whatever it was for the rental. And you want to make sure you get a good deal, but we were suddenly, tasked with buying 2 cars for the price of 1, which basically meant we had to buy 2 cars that, were junky. So, the van wouldn't have been super not junky had we spent twice as much. But we, didn't know Dallas. We didn't know anyone there, really. We didn't have any good referrals on who we should buy a car from. And we just kind of went for it. And I'm still driving the car today that we bought. So I'm kind of proud of that. However, 2 weeks after we bought our first van, got rid of that rental finally. 2 weeks after, Julie was driving to the gym early in the morning. She pulls out of the apartment complex, and she's hit by a guy that runs, and she turns left on a green arrow, or maybe a green light, and she's hit by a guy that runs a red light. And she was fine, luckily. Our apartment complex was really close to the street, so I actually heard the crash and thought to myself, because I knew she had just left, I thought, no way could that be her. And then, 30 seconds later, my phone rings. So we go out there, and the guy was intoxicated, young guy. And anyway, she was fine, and that van was totaled after 2 weeks of use. It was a Toyota Sienna. So we bought another car, another van, and I actually got that from a friend whose parents didn't want theirs anymore, so we bought that one. And we're still driving that one. Anyway, we bought 3 cars in about 2 weeks, and we also were renting a car during that 2 weeks, and it just felt like we were bleeding money. I would call this a disaster. And it really felt like just money was just running through our fingers like sand. And what happened was we started to become really price insensitive. When you have a big hit, when you're looking at buying a house, for instance, you're spending $200,000 on a home or whatever, and then someone says, well, do you want the $500 such and such to go with this? Or you're buying a car and the dealership says, well, would you like us to do the, who knows what, I don't know, the undercoating treatment or the dash mat upgrade or whatever, something else they can roll out. And they know you're gonna roll over for those unless you're really, really aware of the fact that they're preying on you. They're preying, the E kind, not the A kind, because they know that because of this high price point that you're dealing with, and disasters a lot of times deal with high price points, medical emergency, having to fly out somewhere, who knows what, having to suddenly move, having to buy a new car, all those things that could be disasters in their own right. You end up getting this disaster effect where you become price insensitive to other things, and it kind of amplifies. So suddenly, because you're in disaster mode, it's okay to eat out, 5 nights in a row because, oh my gosh, we're right in the middle of a crisis. And so you don't question the fact that maybe you don't need to. Maybe you could save that money. Or, you're buying that car and the salesman's saying, hey, just for an extra little bit. And you're already kind of in this high-priced mode. Not necessarily a disaster where you're planning on buying a car, but you're in this mode where it's like, okay, yeah, I can do that. That's fine. Any time where you're making a large purchase, spending a lot of money, be aware of that. Be aware of the fact that this disaster effect could be taking place right then and there, making you insensitive to prices and to items that you otherwise perhaps wouldn't purchase, maybe wouldn't consider. That's why it's great. I mean, marketers want you to get into a situation where you're buying, and you feel a little bit of urgency. We went to this expo a couple months ago, no, maybe 2 months ago, and they have all these booths after booth after booth of all these different guns you could buy and knives and ammunition and funny T-shirts and all sorts of things. And you see one price point after another, and suddenly buying this $20 thing and that $30 thing and that $50 thing doesn't seem like as big a deal because you've been anchored to that high price situation. So that's today's podcast, just talking about the disaster effect, our own disaster, having to buy 3 cars in 2 weeks, losing one, and recognizing how price insensitive we were becoming to all sorts of other completely unrelated expenses. So run with that and examine your own behavior when you're in the midst of a crisis, in the midst of a disaster. See if you can't check it at the door. Until next time, follow YNAB's 4 rules and you will win financially. You have not budgeted like this.